Before kicking off the webinar, unfortunately our recording started just as we asked the first question, so I'll just take the time now to introduce ourselves. My name's Caitlin Fuller, I am a Senior Recruitment Consultant, and you'll see my colleague Riley Hunter, Managing Director of Huntsman Recruiting. Our panellists for the webinar consisted of Dr. Joe McGirr, MP of Wagga, Mr. Justin Clancy, MP of Albury, and Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack. We first established the Strange Times webinar series to address the impacts that COVID-19 is having within our communities. We have offices both in Albury, Wodonga and Wagga, and our hearts truly do lie within these centres. It's been fantastic to see businesses around these areas supporting one another during this unprecedented time.
In getting to this question, I was trying to think about what concrete things will happen. I'd like just to talk a little bit about the health system, because, and I know there's a small business owners audiences or business owner audience, but it's an illustration of some of the changes in a concrete sense that I'm beginning to see, and looking at the way the health system's responded. I think we'll see about 10 years of transformation in health in about a year. I think health has been struggling for a decade now to use tele-technology, remote technology, virtual consulting systems, and to come to grips with the electronic health record. And I think there's been a great, resistance to that amongst clinicians for a lot of very good reasons, of course. But what I've seen in the last 2 months down here in Wagga, and Justin, I'm interested in your views about what's happening in Albury, but we're now talking about setting up virtual consulting sessions at small hospitals where someone who presents with respiratory symptoms is video linked straight away into a respiratory specialist at the base hospital. Now, that sort of remote use of technology is transformative. I'm also hearing of clinicians linking up and working collaboratively across sites and at a regional level, again using this technology, but also overcoming some of those barriers. So, and I guess that's an illustration of and the way the health system has been using some of its computerized networks to monitor this virus and share information to all the clinicians. The systems that have been in place for checking healthcare staff and screening them, a good example of what a system under pressure using this technology can do. So that's one transformation that I think will be positive, but I mean, it's come out of a crisis. And in saying all this, I don't want to sugarcoat any of this. I think we're going through a pretty traumatic time, but the question was what positive changes? And I suppose that's one instance of a change. Clearly, more broadly, I think there'll be benefits in using technology, just as I've illustrated in health. And I'm hearing a lot from businesses who are trying to jump into the online space, expand the online space. I've also noticed, I have to say, lots of organisations that previously thought working at home was too difficult suddenly becomes possible. People are finding ways to do it. So they could be positives, would mean less travel, less use of petrol. It could be better. I'm wondering how working at home is going to work with people. There's a lot of people like going to work for a whole lot of reasons. And so maybe that'll be a positive, maybe it won't be a positive. But certainly that use of technology going forward could lead to some benefits. Justin, I'm interested in anything you might want to add to that all.
Joe, first thought, when you said, what's it like working from home, you're going to see three of my little ones coming past at different times tonight. And I think that's the first thing, isn't it? As you said, in terms of working at home, it is a transformational shift for our society. There's other societies, society on the subcontinent where the family and workplace is still one and the same. And historically, I suppose that's for Western society, we had evolved away from that. But this might be, again, one of those transformational moments. But I just wanted to go back, Joe, a couple of comments that resonated for me from what you said. One was not to sugarcoat things. And for me, the first thing there is, recognising, acknowledging that there is a lot of trauma out there. There's a lot of hurt. There's people whose lives have been radically altered just in the space of a couple of weeks. I'm conscious of that. And Joe, you and I were part of a conversation earlier this week, and we're talking about values and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And for a lot of people, it's pretty hard to lift your eyes and be looking at higher values when for a lot of people, and a lot of our businesses, we're really at the ground level at the moment. Just survival, food, water, and the basic needs is what's front of mind, I suppose, for some people in that regard. The other aspect, Joe, is also what you're bringing to the conversation, and that's your experiences. We've got a lot of business people online tonight, and I'm just as interested in their perceptions of things. For my part, that shapes my experiences. I was talking to Caitlin before. I'm off the land, and for me, going through this experience now with COVID, I look back on things that have shaped my life and shaped my experiences and informs me. And in particular, the wool market crash of the early 1990s. My parents, their livelihoods in the matter of weeks or months, they had to transform completely. Going through the drought, and for me, I think particularly for our business community, a couple of things out of the droughts that we've been through. The millennial drought was one that had a big influence on my life. And I vividly remember Country Hour and a young woman ringing in and saying she's gone home to help her parents on the dairy farm. And she said, Dad just keeps seeing it through the prism of what has he done wrong. And for us business owners and those involved in business, getting it's so easy to get bogged down into thinking, what have I done, when this is something across the globe, and things that are beyond our control. And that's a difficult thing, particularly in business where we're used to control, in a sense, being able to control factors, and this is beyond that. The other thing for drought, for me, and watching my father go through that, is paralysis of decision making. And again, for me, that's something in terms of business. This is overwhelming. It crowds you in, and it makes it difficult for some people to actually make a decision. I say that because those things shape me, and they're I know I've drifted from the question already, so sorry, but I also, I'm a business owner, so I have a veterinary practice with 40 odd staff. And so when I first brought into the practice was the start of the global financial crisis. And again, being confronted and having to shape your business. And that's probably, in terms of the question, in terms of, this is absolutely, as a crisis, it is a change. It is about change. And it is, as you said, Joe, it's transformational change. Some businesses can pivot really well. For me, that doesn't come so easily. One of my inherent values is stability. So adaptability becomes a little bit more harder in that regard. But for me, through this change, it's about assessing your values and making sure that you are getting yourself in a position to be able to make decisions about your business, and in that sense, making sure that they are framed in the context of the business, of your value set for your business.
And I guess the only thing I'd add in terms of experience, Justin, I don't want to forget, both you and I have seen in our electorates the devastation of the bushfires, and which all of January I just kept, I know in Snowy Valleys area, Justin, how devastating that was, absolutely catastrophic, and how badly communities have been affected by that. And it's almost incredible to think now what this is coming on top of that. And those communities that were on their knees, and I remember people were beginning to talk in Batlow, and I'm sure in Tumbarumba they were talking about return of tourism, looking forward to a bit of an uplift with Ciderfest and Batlow and Easter, and now that's gone. And I think sadly, I think the cutback on travel at Easter is important, that we don't have people coming to the region in terms of slowing the spread of the epidemic. But I think that's going to have a profound effect, and I think you've highlighted there a profound effect on our psyches really, and the way we approach things. And that is actually, there's a sense of fragility out there more broadly. I think that is a real anxiety for people that we have to, which is why I think the government's measures in terms of trying to support the economy, and I know there's a lot of argument about them, but they have been big, they have come, and I think they are important, not just economically, but also in terms of people's mental health and how we cope with this. So I guess we have wandered a little bit away from the positives, but thank you. I think it's important we just don't get caught up in too positive, I suppose, because we are facing some real issues.
Yeah. Would both of you have even one message that you would put out there to businesses and employees, I guess, that would be a calming sort of message to people? Like, what would that be in these times?
Yeah. For me, Riley, as I mentioned, you're not alone. Make sure that you're not alone in that regard. And I mentioned the conversation we had with Joe, and it was an epiphany for me. Reach out to your team as well. Seek their thoughts and seek their advice. I think we tend to, again, if you're a business owner or a manager, you're thinking, I've got to make all these decisions on my own. Reach out to business advice and business advisors, but also reach out to your team, and because they're more often or not, they're equally invested in your business and care and committed for your business as well. So turning to them for advice is important as well.
And I think that I would back up that turning for advice. Certainly information we've had here in Wagga from the interaction we've had with the Chamber of Commerce, Committee for Wagga, Women in Business, the council here, is that a lot of businesses are overwhelmed, particularly around cash flow issues now. And initially they look at the federal government support for business around cash, and they see that coming through the tax system and being a delay. But I understand it for many businesses, once you talk those issues through and seek some assistance with that, it can turn out to be not nearly as bad as it looks. So I think it is important to seek that support, as Justin just said. And I think Australia, for all the criticisms that have been levelled, I think the approach to managing this has been good, and I think it will mean that we will come out better at the end of it, and in fact stronger, less damaged than perhaps some other countries that will take longer to recover. So that is also a positive, I think.
Riley, I was just going to say, talk about the positives that COVID might bring, and we can't predict the future, but hopefully one of the positives that comes out of it is a sense of collaboration and networking and working with other people in your community, with shared goals in that regard. So I see that as potentially positive, just like this session is tonight in that regard. So I see that as being important.
And I think we're seeing that as well. Like a lot of businesses that are bringing those walls down and just opening up, even to their competitors as well. And we're all in this together, and we all want to have successful businesses at the end of the day. So people can be employed and we can keep things ticking over. But to do that, everyone's just got to band together now. And it's not a dog eat dog thing. It's like we're all in it together.
It's one thing you just mentioned there, Riley, that resonated for me is we want to be out the other side, and for me and for my business at the moment, it's really difficult because the past 2 weeks has been admittedly reactive. Dealing with issues, innumerable problems, challenges, being confronted with those, and just how do I respond to that? How do I respond to that? At some point for businesses, it's then just trying to lift the eyes from that a little bit and going back to that strategic focus of, how do I, actually probably for some businesses, a really difficult decision in the first place is, where am I going? Is actually, and this is, don't trivialise this, but this is a difficult decision. For some businesses, is it the right thing to exit? And I know that's extremely difficult. I suppose for me, that's an experience from the drought, seeing that and saying for some that's the case. But once you've made that decision, what is it that I can do about my business to shape it so that we can come through this and be out the other side? being lean, things like that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, guys, I'm mindful of the time that, both great answers there as well. So I think, and people that didn't hear Katie at the start, we do have the Deputy PM coming on who's trying to log in at the moment. Who's just finishing up the cabinet meeting.
He is trying for.
I think you're on mute, Katie.
Sorry, is everyone?
Can't hear you, mate. Sorry.
Oh. Anyone hear me now?
Yes.
So, I'm just trying to get Michael on now. So 2 seconds.
And I'll rip into this next question as well while we're at it anyway. But we probably covered one of those in there anyway. But do you think the retail and business sectors will look different on the other side of this here? Like you mentioned health, Joe, but do you think like all businesses will look completely different after this? Do you think it'll be a different landscape for everyone?
I think it's going to depend. Obviously, it goes without saying, it's going to depend on your business. And some businesses are going to discover online, I think, and that will transform their operations. As Justin said, some businesses may not make it through, of course. There's a couple of things that I think are going to change. And one is, and I'm not sure how this is going to work out, but one is what's going to happen globally to trade and to travel. It just seems to me this virus started in China. It spread throughout the world very quickly. It seems to me it spread because we have so much international travel. It's become so much a part of our lives, and not for trade and for holiday, okay, for university and education. I mean, many students at university routinely go overseas now to study, and universities in Australia depend on that input of students. Trade, of course, will continue, but lots of business trips go with trade. And then there's the whole tourist sector. What will happen to that? I remember when 9/11 happened, we suddenly went through security screening and longer queues and the whole nature of travel. It didn't stop it, I guess. But this has been a bit of a wake-up call because, of course, we might get through this virus, but who's to say another one won't appear? Boy, I'm being miserable tonight, aren't I? Too many sci-fi movies.
I was going to ask, well, you're cheeky, but obviously you're a doctor. Like, surely tell me that you're put everyone at ease. Anyway, you're working on a cure, aren't you?
Well, that would be a great business opportunity. Well, we need to speed up the vaccine production turnaround. I mean, there's a whole opportunity there. You would think that science would hopefully grasp to make sure that that's narrowed. But look, going forward, how will that affect businesses? I mean, my sense is that international travel will quieten for a bit. It may change. It may be much more difficult, much more expensive. I'm not sure how the cruise ship industry is going to survive. And the reason I mention that is because I think as a society, we are connected globally. We think globally, we trade globally. And I think that's going to have a profound impact on businesses, but I'm not quite sure what. Yeah, I don't know, Justin, if you want to.
The first thing there, Joe, is we've talked about crisis precipitating change. Crisis is a change event, so full stop, there is going to be change. And again, for business, it's accepting that is the case is part of it. Again, our conversation we had earlier this week, Joe, we're talking about my work team, and I said one of my inherent values is stability. I say to people when they come on board, I don't like losing team members, and we're talking about this could have a big impact on my team in that regard. And so changes, and in some ways accepting that is part of it. You talked about, absolutely, Joe, there'll be global factors. You're talking, I got to thinking the other night coming home, I'm fascinated by history and looking, it's nearly 100 years since the Spanish flu, and think the impact on the community at that time after the Great War, we rebounded. We had the Roaring 20s, but we also had the rise of nationalism. And so will there be an impact on the global order in terms of nationalism? But I think just moving away from that global situation and just looking back at a business or community perspective, we can't predict the future, but we do know that what our actions and what our decisions are now can certainly impact on that. So I think for a business perspective, know that there will be change. Where's that equilibrium? Some things will be changed permanently. Some things will change for a while and then drift back to the way they were before. But certainly we can't predict that, but we know that our actions and decisions will impact on it.
And we see businesses already in like our local communities as well, like especially within retail and hospitality, adapting and becoming online and changing their business so they can still be viable throughout these times. Are you seeing that with any other different types of businesses apart from retail and hospitality that have completely just, I guess, pivoted at lightning speed overnight?
Yeah, for me, Riley, I suppose businesses I've been in touch with, I had called into a cafe the other day and talking to them, and it's interesting. They said, and again, without being like that, they said this is perhaps the crisis that I needed because I've had to transform my business, but it's actually already a little bit of a green shoot for them. They've actually found a market they've now entering that they never would have even considered beforehand. So it's interesting that some of the, again, as I said, some of the pivots in that regard. We've had manufacturers in Albury contact us and contact Australian Industry Group over the last few days talking about we can pivot our manufacturing towards health. So it's interesting in that regard.
I think the health pivot, Justin, will be. I think that aspect of manufacturing is really interesting. I think we've kind of become a bit of a country that maybe has outsourced a fair bit of that, and that would be actually amazing if we pivoted around on that and became much more self-sufficient around medical technology, because that's such a high-end product. Labour hire companies are another area that's pivoted quickly. I know a lot of people have lost work in the crisis, but there's actually work appearing in other parts of the economy. And I've been interested in how some of the labour hire companies have leapt onto that and been able to pivot and switch, which is interesting. And it actually is interesting because I don't recall that previously happening to quite that extent. I don't know whether that's because the labour market's more free now, less unionised, not quite sure, but that's another area.
I'm interested, Joe, and even for Riley and Katie here. One thing in my mind is, will this see a move towards larger corporates, or will there be a move back towards SMEs? And in that sense, I suppose the retail industry is one industry that I'm wondering about that in that regard. Obviously, big grocery stores have benefited over the last few weeks, but so too, our local butcher and things like that. So I'm interested how that dynamic plays out as well. For me, I'd be very keen to see SMEs, grow or hopefully a rejuvenation of SMEs in that regard.
I think we've already definitely seen it, like you touched on with butchers, for instance. So that's a prime example. But just to touch on that as well, and then Katie's got a couple of questions she'd love to go through as well. But I guess after COVID-19, have you guys got any plans that like to attract larger businesses and government departments, for instance, to decentralise and relocate to regional Australia? I guess like they could look to boost regional economies, plus help with the spread of the population. And I've always been a massive advocate for decentralisation. There's organisation like AgriFutures, for instance, came out of Canberra, had 15 staff, and now they've got over 40 to 50. But I think, are you guys thinking about that, or are you currently got anything in play for that?
I suppose a couple of thoughts there, Riley. One is the whole question about decentralisation. I'm not sure whether COVID itself is the trigger for decentralisation, or whether some of the consequences of COVID actually encourage decentralisation. By that, what I mean, again, the whole working remotely and working from home. So whether they lend themselves to encourage businesses to consider decentralisation. Again, for me, it's probably not so much about trying specifically to attract this business or that business, but it's also looking at what are the levers that we can pull that help provide the environment for businesses to want to come to the regions, or for those businesses that are already there to grow and be sustainable. So, again, and that's where government does have a role. I know Joe has spoken in Parliament on payroll tax. That's something that is important to me as well. I think that's an area of reform, whether or not we get it or not, Joe, but that's certainly an area for me to focus on. So it's about those levers and how by pulling them, hopefully we can encourage business.
It's good to see, Justin. It's been good to see the government getting used to doing without some payroll tax, because they've brought forward the reductions, and they've also given a number of companies large holidays and deferrals. So if they can get a bit more used to it, it'd be good. I think that's excellent. I just noticed that Michael's joined us, and just welcome him. Hi, Michael.
Thank you, Joe. I don't know whether you can see me, but I can hear you.
We've got you there now. Thank you very much, Michael.
G'day, Michael.
Sorry, I've been a little bit delayed. I've been chairing a meeting with the opposition and the government, so all good.
Fine. Now, we're a nice, tight-knit group here, so you can share those secrets with us, Michael, if you like.
We'll reveal all next Wednesday in Parliament, Riley.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much for joining in.
It was just a meeting to talk about the $130 billion Job Keeper initiative, which is obviously going to support businesses right throughout the Riverina and right throughout the nation.
And just on that topic as well, I guess, like what, Justin and Joe, what are you seeing? Like, what are the sort of questions that are coming up from people at the moment in your communities about that Job Keeper subsidy?
I think for myself, Riley, it's certainly very much welcomed. I think it gives certainly gives a level of assurance in these pretty uncertain times. So I think it's very much welcomed in that regard.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the only caveat is that there does seem to be a bit of confusion from time to time about how it'll work, and it's coming through the tax system and where it does and doesn't apply, and so on. But I think that is getting ironed out, and I think the important thing is to try and talk with businesses or refer them to good advice to see how it works, because it is an enormous benefit that the federal government's come up with, and I think they'd be congratulated on that, I have to say. And I think it's an important initiative, and I think it will be a benefit. It's interesting, I think, with cash flow I mentioned earlier and the benefits coming through tax, and now there's another benefit coming through for the JobKeeper. I think it's just been a little bit, well, let me put it this way. It's been important for businesses not to panic and to get their mind around how they can take advantage of the stuff that is on offer.
And Joe, what I'd recommend those businesses do is go onto the website australia.gov.au. It's got all the economic information, all the support that you may be eligible for, and there's something there for everyone. I mean, I know that sounds like an open-ended plug, but seriously, people, there is so much information overload. Your office, no doubt, is experiencing that. Justin's is, no doubt Riley's is. There's so much information out there, but it's all in the one place. If people can just sort of excuse themselves from the television and the radio and the papers just for a minute and get it from all the one site, australia.gov.au. It's got everything there.
And to your point, Michael, that's exactly it. Is businesses are confronted with having to make decisions. Make sure they're informed decisions. Seek the information. Get an understanding of what is out there before you make that decision.
Indeed. And look, it is a good initiative. And you're right, Joe. The legislation is still being drafted, so there's still a few things that are being worked through. But if businesses think that, yes, I've had, a severe drought, and if my income is going, or my turnover is going to be based on what happened 12 months ago, I won't have a 30% downturn. I've fixed that. That point was made to me quite clearly a couple of days ago. I rang the Treasurer. When you're the DPM, you get a bit of these, you get that ear of the Treasurer, and I said, we need to adjust that anomaly. It's been adjusted. Another business rang me yesterday and said, look, we're going to be down 25%, but what I'm really worried about is then having defaulters on invoices. So I might be down 50%, but I'm only going to be down 25% according to the ATO. That's going to have an effect. I won't be eligible. rah, rah, rah. Well, the ATO will also use some discretion. They've been very lenient lately. They've been very good. They want to work to keep as many business doors open.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's I agree with you there, Michael, about being proactive and considered. And I know so far from our experience, when people have come to us with issues, we've been able to find where there might be help for them. It is in different pockets and different places, depending on people's circumstances sometimes. It is a question of working it through. And I must say, with the bushfires, it took a while, I think, but there was a much greater level of leniency in the applications from that. And so I think the government has responded in those circumstances at federal and state level. But that's not to say it's perfect, can I just say. And part of our role, I think, is to make sure that we identify people who fall through the cracks. I hate to say that, it's a cliched expression, but
No, look, you're right. You're right,
where
Joe.
there are gaps that they are identified, because we can raise those issues. I can raise them at state level, as can Justin. And of course, Michael, you've been very receptive to our input as well. So thank you for that.
You're right, Joe. And that's not to forget the drought continues, even though we've had some good showers of rain, and even overnight over southern New South Wales, it's been tremendous. But, you know, the effects of the drought are still there. And the other thing too is the bushfires. I mean, there are still so many people still battling the relief and recovery efforts for the bushfires, and they can't be forgotten, and they won't be forgotten by you, Justin, myself, or any other level of government.
Just to your comment, Joe, too, is as you said, is responsiveness, and you mentioned things not being perfect, and that's the nature of it. If you're trying to be really responsive, you know that things aren't going to be perfect, and that goes to what was it, General Patton's quote about better a good plan today than a perfect plan next week, and that's the nature of it at the moment.
Yeah. And just to touch on quickly with the bushfires, for instance, and with COVID now as well, like obviously we've had that double whammy happen to our regions. How many years do you think the economic fallout will be felt in our regions from this?
How long's a piece of string, Riley? I mean, the drought. People, one shower doesn't end the drought, and so even a couple, it doesn't end the drought. The drought could still affect this region for many, many more months, indeed a year if we don't get a good crop this year, more than a year. Bushfires, that's going to take years to recover from, and now COVID-19, well, we've just racked up $320 billion of additional debt that we weren't expecting or planning for. How long is that going to take to pay back? You know, it's anybody's guess. But we're Australians. We're resilient. The good thing is the iron ore price is up. The good thing is, even though we still, you know, we were through the drought and we're a big agricultural region, we still produce enough food to feed 75 million people. So that's 3 times more than the Australian population. We're smart people. We're innovative people. We've got good business people such as you. We've got a goodwill there through different members. I mean, you've got a Liberal and Independent and a National online, talking, cooperating, collaborating. We'll get through this.
Perfect. Thank you. And Katie, you've got a couple of questions there as well.
Yeah, look, Michael, how can regional Australia protect itself from the further spread of COVID-19?
By following what I've heard Joe say every day, and he's a doctor, so he knows what he's talking about, by washing our hands, by self-isolating, by if we have to go into quarantine or self-isolation, follow the rules, by making sure that if we're outdoors, we obey that 4 square metre rule and we stay a good distance away from everybody else, and doing all the right things will protect others and will certainly protect those most vulnerable members of the community, and that is those in the age bracket of 65 and up.
And Justin, are you seeing that the majority of the population in your communities are abiding by these laws, or?
I just want to add that I get a lot of comments made from people who think we should lock the region down, somehow build up a wall around the region and prevent anyone from coming in. Of course, it depends where you are, where the wall should be, whether it's around Wagga or Batlow or Albury or whatever. I mean, the fact is that we're a state and we actually depend on the state and the government to survive. And the reality is that we just can't enforce that sort of lockdown with a whole lot of issues around work, transport, agriculture, and so on. What we do have to do is do the lockdown that we can do. And that is, we have got to restrict the travel that's not essential and stay at home. I mean, stay at home unless, it's an essential thing for you to go out or you've got work. There are clear criteria around that. I have to say, mostly people get it. It has taken a week or two. We've had lots of queries. Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do the other? And obviously the police have some discretion around how they interpret it, but they are being pretty strict here, and certainly in Wagga, where I am, talking to Bob Noble. I'm interested in Justin's experience. Fact of the matter is, the best way of protecting the region is to, as Michael's just said, stick to the rules. And they're pretty clear. Stay at home, actually. Stay at home. There are clear situations where you don't have to stay at home, but otherwise you should stay at home. Anyway, you can tell I'm a bit passionate about it. Sorry.
To your point, Joe, I mean, putting up a wall is not going to be effective. We've had the debate in Albury-Wodonga about border closure over the past week. I was in Tokemore a fortnight ago, and Toke's a small country town, but it's got the Newell Highway going straight through the middle of it. Are we closing off our freight to these regional towns as well? So I think in that sense, it is to your point. But also, and Joe, you and I are both in a teleconference with the Chief Health Officer of New South Wales, and the talk is, it's not about, it's about this, you're not going to be able to contain or beat this virus in that sense. It's about, again, just slowly, sustainably, so that your health system can cope with it. So it will be in our communities, but it's about those best practices that you've been talking about.
And it is extraordinary how the health system regionally has expanded its ICU capacity, freed up beds, and mobilised. And it's because we've got time to do that. And we've got time to do that because of the slowing of the transmission that's taken place so far, and which we need to continue to do.
Yeah.
And you mentioned an important point, Justin, there, and that is freight. We have to keep our truckies moving because they are delivering food, fuel, medical supplies, as in masks and personal protection equipment and medicine, and stocking up our supermarkets. That's essential, and we've gone to a lot of work to make sure that freight lines and logistics supply chains can continue.
Spot on.
Perfect. So, Michael, how important is it to maintaining essential supply chains to get produce and products to where they are?
Look, it's critical, Caitlin, and I've been holding meetings. Well, I've been talking with my state transport ministers each and every day, and I thank Andrew Constance and Paul Toole from New South Wales in that regard, colleagues of Joe and Justin's. They've worked very hard. We've had regular teleconferences to make sure that the little things, sometimes there are things which are put into place that you don't realise will be an issue, and of course, closing down some of our roadhouses was a real issue. So fortunately, we were able to get on top of that early and make sure that roadhouses such as Tarcutta, such as the one in Hammond Avenue, that as best they can stay open so that they can provide those showers and toilet amenities, and of course takeaway food, rest stops for truckies. So crucial. They've got to manage their fatigue, but they've also got to freshen up and get back on the road and do what they do best, and that is deliver everything in Australia bar babies.
Yeah.
Look, everyone, we might open it up to the Q&A from our audience. So I saw a good question from Anthony McFarlane. Thanks, Anthony, for joining tonight. For Michael and both Joe and Justin, does Australia need to have a new base level of industry self-sufficiency to protect against these shocks?
Well, I can kick off. You never quite know that when these shocks are going to occur. So nobody 12 months ago could have predicted a pandemic. Although having said that, the Secretary of Treasury did write his thesis on this very thing. So that has actually helped guide us to where we need to go. As Dr. Stephen Kennedy, he was the former Secretary of Infrastructure. But look, Australia is very well placed to meet these shocks. And the good thing about it is that we were heading towards a surplus. So when you've got money in reserve, when you've got an economy which is going very well and you're well handling the economy, you can actually absorb these shocks better than if you were in a situation of deficit and debt, and we're seeing that overseas with some of the countries, and the COVID-19 has got totally out of control because they actually haven't had a government which was prepared to make the early calls, the hard calls when they were needed, such as shutting down transport from or aviation from China. And so we've made those hard calls early, and that's helping us to be in a situation we are now. Of course, 23 people dead from this is a total tragedy, but we're a lot better prepared and going a lot better at this situation at the moment than our counterparts overseas.
Anthony, thanks. Good question. I think for me, it comes back to is the learnings to take out are more around your operations and processes. So are we making sure that we've got operations and processes in place that make sure that we are responsive and have adaptability? I think in that sense, because you see people saying that we should have had ventilators and tests and things like that, but no one can, who's to say that the next pandemic is going to be a respiratory virus? It might be a severe gastrointestinal virus for all we know. We've talked to, and Joe would appreciate this, lifespans of tests and things like that. So you can't really stockpile necessarily, but your question, I think the nub of that is around procurement. What's our procurement strategy? How do we make sure that we can respond when you've got a global situation to make sure that you've got the processes in place?
The only thing I'd add is that as I said earlier, I would like to think this is an opportunity for us to look at local manufacturing in particularly high-end, high-value-added products, which maybe we've tended in a globalised world to put out to where it's cheapest. I mean, that's the model. And as a result, that's been pretty easy to do. Now we're being challenged around that, I think. I don't know how travel and trade will go in a world where viruses can be so lethal. And I'm wondering whether there is an opportunity for us and to stop thinking about getting it outsourced and thinking about how we do it and manufacture it here more efficiently. And maybe that is an opportunity. Anyway, we'll see.
All right, thanks, guys. And we've just another one from Yasantha. I'm just paraphrasing here as well, but basically the question is, have we got any strategy in place at the moment, or have we rolled any out the last few weeks to attract healthcare workers to rural and regional Australia?
Jay, you can kick off on that one. It's all about health.
Can I just say that there's a number of things have been happening to try. So the question was about attracting healthcare workers to regional and rural Australia. So there's a couple of things I want to cover. First of all, we need to clearly increase the workforce. And I know that the Medical Board of Australia, for example, has put in place has liberalised some of its registration criteria. I noticed today there's a number of people coming out of retirement who will be available to assist. So that's the medical workforce globally, and I think that would be being mirrored in nursing and allied health. So that's important to have a number of people who can contribute to that. The second question is, is there enough coming regionally? And this is a big issue actually, because regionally I'd have to say we are a little bit vulnerable, not just in health, but across a range of businesses. For example, if you look at local government, because of the size in regional areas, you only need a small group of people to be affected. And of course it can affect the provision of a range of services, not just health. That is why it is actually important that we slow the spread. That is why it's so important that we obey the restrictions, because in a way, regional communities are more vulnerable. I think we just got to be realistic about that. When I've spoken to the local health district here, I think that they have planned this well. They've identified resources well. As I say, they are encouraging people to come back out of retirement. They are looking at how that they support their local workforce and protect their workforce. So I think that is going as well as it could. That would be my perception. Justin might comment in Albury. The fact of the matter, though, is we also have a worldwide problem. So there are people screaming out for medical professionals across the planet. And the other issue is we can't have too many people travelling back and forth. So that's also got to be looked at. So it's a complex situation.
One thing we're doing for the future, though, Riley, as well as the federal government has invested $74 million into the Murray-Darling Rural Medical School Network, and Joe knows about this well. I've got to say that was one of the best things I did when I became Deputy Prime Minister, because what we've got to do is create our own doctors for the future. And what we do is by that medical school network, they do the start to finish, all of the training within the local environment. I know it's going to be so good for Wagga Wagga. Turned the first sod at Orange not that long ago, Charles Sturt University, UNSW. I know Joe's had a lot of experience with Notre Dame in these medical schools and clinical schools. They do work. We get local people, regional people, and we know if we train them all in the regions, generally, most of the time, they stay in the regions.
Yeah.
And of course, it means you've got a bucket load of students who also will be able to assist.
Yeah.
Sorry, Justin.
And I was going to just say, to Michael's point, I suppose in the immediate sense of the COVID crisis, I think, we'll be looking at things like centralised pooling of locums and human resources, things like what they saw through the bushfires, allying referral hospitals in Sydney with regional hospitals. So that's in the immediate sense. But then to Michael's point, for all three of us, we recognise the importance of growing our medical workforce in regional areas.
One way we can stop the spread of COVID into the regions too, and I've made a strong statement nationally today in the national press, is for people at Easter to stay at home. And I know Joe laboured on this point earlier. Well done. We don't need those people who usually make their camping trips at Easter time to come here. Stay at home and watch the great outdoors, or watch Backyard Ashes, or watch the Merger. Watch those great movies at home. Don't come regionally. We want you, when the COVID crisis is over, by all means, have that destination Riverina then, or Murray, whatever the case might be, Justin or Joe, but stay away this Easter. And by people in capital cities staying away and staying at home will stop the spread.
Fantastic thing that Destination Riverina Murray are doing right now, Michael. In fact, they launched it, I think, yesterday. They're getting a campaign out there telling people, jump online too. Still support these businesses that are in the bush, but by doing it, by getting online, looking at their product, seeing how you can make your contribution in that regard.
That's brilliant, Justin. That's what I was just about to ask Michael on a national level. Like, how can we prevent that anyway? Is it just an education thing from the federal government, or?
Oh, well, it's people doing what they've been asked to do, and that is stay at home. Joe made that point very clearly and lucidly earlier. I know Justin said it in media. We just need people to follow the rules, stay at home, and we'll stop the spread.
Okay. And I think there will be some more stringent guidelines from the state government on this. I certainly, speaking to Superintendent Noble here, I think the police are now also looking at being even more vigilant on this issue. And look, it's absolutely critical. Easter could be could be terrible if we're in flux with tourists. Thanks, Michael, for emphasising that.
And Joe and Justin, just to touch on it as well, what are the rates of infection for COVID at the moment? Do you have any sort of live updates in both communities?
Justin, you.
No, you go, Joe.
So for the Murrumbidgee as a whole, the update today was 40 cases, of which 37 were from travel overseas. One was a travel interstate, and 2, I think they're still investigating, and I think they were connected to someone who's come from overseas. That's positive in the sense that they're all connected directly to overseas. There might have been one that they're still uncertain about, and that's that community-to-community transmission that we're worried about. I think there were 9 in Wagga, and I think, Justin, 6 in Albury and 6
in Albury as of this morning, and I think 6 at Federation, and first one at Snowy Valley. So, yeah, smattering around.
Nationally, it's 5,139 cases and now 27 deaths, and that's, of course, 27 too many. But you look at the worldwide deaths, it's 47,273. That's a significant number of people. And, of course, the early reports this morning on the news suggesting that Indonesia could have more than 500,000 deaths. That is very, very worrying, because if that spreads through Papua New Guinea and the Pacific Islands, that's a world of trouble.
Yeah.
God, yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Anything else there coming through, Katie, as well?
Yeah, look, I have a question here from Jenna Roberts, who is the director at Wagga Family support. So she's asked, why are not-for-profits still expected to tender during a time where we are struggling to adapt our support to our community and continue a high level of service delivery?
Yeah, it's a good question. We can have that discussion offline with Jenna. Not-for-profits are doing a power of good, whether it's Meals on Wheels. I know we've just announced a $59.3 million support mechanism for Meals on Wheels, and I talked to the locals here today, and they're delighted about that. But yes, we can have that discussion online. She raised a good point.
Yeah, I'd fully support looking at that. I think that's a very good point. Just at the moment, I think government's focused on a whole range of issues. So that's actually, a good point, Jenna. Happy to take that up.
So I know it is tough at that time as well to with the tendering, but do we sort of, on the other hand, still need to be doing that to push things forward and to gain new contracts and things like that as well? Or just on the other hand, I'm thinking too. But
I think it's two sides to this. I think at the moment, with everything going on, what would a tendering process deliver with people distracted and trying to manage and get through the current situation? So I think the point about going through that process, I think it in the short term could be a distraction now. The point you make is, are we setting ourselves up for not having a competitive market? Fair point. Another point is, do you extend the contract by another year, which of course is a frustrating process. But I think the point's still well made. I'm happy to take it up, Jenna.
Excellent. And just a question from me, just to sneak in there as well. But I was thinking this afternoon, obviously with what's going on, you guys would all be under the pump, I guess, especially you, Mike. How do you guys manage your energy? Do you meditate? Do you do yoga? Do you take naps? There's got to be something that you do to manage coffee.
Coffee.
See, I want to hear what Michael does.
There's got to be something, and Michael, even with Scott Morrison, obviously he would be under a hell of a lot of pressure, and I don't know how much sleep he's getting. But yeah, how do you manage that? Because I think even as business owners and employees,
Well, what I would say is Justin, Joe, and I have jobs, and so there are many people out there who don't have jobs, and these crises. Well, you've got to be your best self to support those and to have empathy for, which we all do, to support those who haven't got jobs, who are worried about their families and how they're going to feed them, how they're going to go in the future. They're more important than whether politicians are getting sleep or not. I mean, that's, doesn't matter whether I get 4 hours sleep or not. We've got to put in the hard yards to support our communities. That's what we're elected to do, and I'm sure that's what Justin, Joe, and I will continue to do.
Yeah. What about yourself, Justin and Joe as well? Do you have anything ways of managing that energy throughout this time so you do stay as calm and relaxed and level-headed as possible?
To Michael's point, certainly, and as said right at the start, acknowledging that there's a lot of hurt and trauma out there. So, but I'll be upfront too. There's times where you get that sense of anxiety, concern. I've mentioned that I'm a business owner myself. I've had those feelings. I've had the feelings of being overwhelmed as well. But like all business owners in that regard, or all people in leadership, making sure you've got those things like family and friends around you that you can connect with, someone who can listen to you. Just being able to jump on the phone and talk to a friend and be able to just spend that time in that regard. And obviously, it is important particularly for our community, for business owners, business leaders. Make sure you are taking time to recharge your own batteries. And we saw that during the bushfires again. Here comes a 3-year-old.
That's a support network.
That's support coming in, absolutely. Make sure you keep your batteries. You've got to be recharging your own batteries as well.
Yeah, excellent. No, thank you. And what about the one from Rebecca, Katie? I think that's not a bad question.
There seems, so Rebecca O'Brien's wrote in, she's asked, there seems to be a gap for working directors of companies / trusts who don't get a salary. Will we be entitled to the JobKeeper subsidy too?
We're still working through who's entitled, who's not. there are a lot of people, but of course it is cut off at $1,500 per fortnight. So we're still working through all the finer points of that. The legislation is going to the House of Representatives next Wednesday. We've got a special sitting of Parliament to pass that. Look, you know, there will be many people in many sectors who will be eligible for that payment, and it's to back-end business. It's to make sure that business can open its doors and can remain open. And of course, if they're not eligible for JobKeeper, they'll probably be eligible for JobSeeker. And again, I'd say to Rebecca, go onto australia.gov.au. It's being updated all the time. See what eligibility status there is for directors and for everybody else. The information is there.
Excellent. And look, we'll probably we'll just have one or two, maybe really quick ones here anyway, but we've got one for yourself, Joe, from Alan Johnson as well. So the New South Wales gig state project rollout for regional New South Wales, which Wagga is a pilot site. This will further enable the capacity for both the private and public sector in regional New South Wales. Do you see this circumstance accelerating that New South Wales gig state project rollout or not?
Well, I'd hope so, and thanks, Alan, for that question. And Alan, with the Committee for Wagga, has been thinking very clearly about how we get out the other side of this, which is great. And NBN's a big part of that. And I've got to say, I think this has got to be this has got to be a call to trying to get that sped up. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is, of course, what we're now discovering, the importance of NBN for remote working and technology and meetings like this and webinars, and the demand's gone through the roof, I understand, and people are talking about connections not being as good. So having that sped up for regional sites is important. And can I also say another issue that's come through has been with education and schools, and this is something we're going to have to tackle at state level. But some schools are managing the online stuff at home well, but actually we've got communities still where there are significant numbers of families and students who do not have internet, and that is actually at least partly a structural issue, not a cost issue. Structural issue, they can't actually get access to the internet. So that continues to be a bit of a problem for us. And with this online schooling and so on, that's, I think, something we're going to really have to work hard and think about. Rolling out the NBN and the gig economy is probably not going to solve that problem, but it does illustrate how important that infrastructure is when we get into situations like this, to how we conduct business and rethink how we do business. So good. Thanks, Alan.
That's great. Thanks, guys. And look, probably last question for everyone as well from Carl Sudots. I think it's a good one as well. For how long is government prepared to maintain the lockdown or the current measures? And what are the indications that lockdown could be lifted? I saw something on the ABC News today about 90 days or something. One of the they were discussing that. What's happening there, Michael? Do you know?
Well, our financial assistance will go for as long as it takes. The health of the nation comes first and foremost. The health of the economy is important too. So we will continue to do what we need to do. We've already spent $320 billion of assistance measures, and if that needs to be revisited, well, we'll revisit it. I know we've had a number of meetings today. I've got more tomorrow to see what else we can do to help various sectors of the economy. As far as the lockdown measures go, if people, the Prime Minister has made it quite clear that it could take up to 6 months. It could be longer. If it's longer, well, people are just going to have to follow the rules, because the important thing is we get people through the other side in the healthiest way they can, and of course to get as many businesses through the other side as well. But as long as it takes is probably the answer to both questions.
Yeah. Do you think they look to, just quickly as well, like have a different set of circumstances and rules for regional areas that have contained it, or I guess a lot more like we have in Murrumbidgee as well, compared to cities like Sydney and Melbourne?
Well, that's why I think we've been so clear in saying to people, stay in capital cities, stay at home. If you're staying home, you won't come into the regions. And whether or not the states decide to, they've closed their borders, whether they decide to then close them by districts, it's a little bit more difficult. But, we want people to have a little bit of freedom of movement. We can't it would be very difficult to actually lock down just communities. But look, if we have to do that, if we have to take more drastic measures, I'm sure the premiers and the chief ministers will discuss that with the Prime Minister. We'll be doing it at cabinet level, federally as well. We'll do what's best for the nation.
Can I just make it? Can I just add another element to this? Thanks, Michael. I think that's absolutely right. But I mean, this idea that you can somehow preserve a population of people completely from the virus, it means you'll have a population of people who are completely unprotected from the virus until there's a vaccine. So the idea that you could somehow cordon off a community where the virus wasn't, test everyone or whatever. I mean, the fact of the matter is the virus this is the sort of virus, it will reach all regions. It just will. The question is making sure that when it comes, people don't get bucket loads of it, so that better chance of surviving, and that the volume of demand at any one time allows our health services to manage it. The idea that you can keep a population of people somehow pristine from it means you'll have to keep them cut off until the vaccine gets in, and that could be months away. I think Mick Fuller said this morning he's asked for 90. He said that 90 days for the lockdown orders to be in place, and he indicated, he's the police commissioner, he indicated he wasn't going to ask for it for longer than that. And my view would be I'd wait and see at the end of 90 days. I think Michael's right. We have to be in for this. This could be a longer period of time. We have to be in for the long haul.
We need to be prepared for the long haul, and also recognising that there is that lag to the decision as well. We know that with the virus, 10 to 14 days. So a decision's made at this point in time. It's going to be at least a couple of weeks before you can even determine whether that decision, what impact it's had.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you very much. And look, guys, I know we've just gone over time a little bit then. So, no, we truly appreciate everyone's time. Have you got a final message you would all like to, I guess, put out there to everyone?
Follow the rules, stay well.
Thanks, Michael.
Stay home. Stay home and stay positive.
Yeah.
We'll get through it together.
Take care. Reach out to one another. Be on the phone. Know that you're not alone in your situation. But take care, everyone.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Joe, Justin.
Look, we can't hear you, Katie.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep, got you now.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Joe, Justin, and Michael for being a part of our webinar this evening. We really, really appreciate you getting on board.
It's been a pleasure.
All the attendees too, we really appreciate it. So, we'll send out a recording of this later on to everyone as well. But thank you all for your time, and all the best.
Take care.
All right, cheers. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.